Okay, small group, but it's okay. Hi everyone, thanks for coming. So this work is together with one of my graduate students, Ji-Young Park at Claremont Graduate University, and we are also part of the Center for Behavioral and Economic Studies at CGU. And in this study, just to give you a preview, we're looking at what reaction time, how long it takes an individual to make a decision. How is it that the other individual takes that? So how do you interpret somebody's decision time in a social dilemma game? So if somebody takes a long time versus a short time, do you believe is more or less likely to contribute? So that's kind of what we're interested in. So just to give you an example, we all know the familiar prisoner's dilemma game, when two prisoners are put into two different rooms, and they are partners in crime, and they are asked to either confess or not to a crime. So in the situation of the prisoner's dilemma is that they make the decision simultaneously without seeing each other's choice. So, so consider the prisoner's dilemma game with a little twist. In scenario 1, so suppose you are one of these prisoners, and then your partner is in the other room, and less than a few seconds later, your partner leaves the room and you see him leaving. Okay? So scenario 1, your partner has made a decision very quickly. Scenario 2, you learn that your partner has made a decision in more than a few minutes. Okay? So my question is, who do you trust to cooperate with you? Who do you think is more likely to have confessed to the crime? That which decides in a split of a second, or that which takes longer to make the decision. And so that's why we call this paper, Whose Hand Will You Hold? If you're in need, who is it that you are going to ask for help? So in particular, in generally speaking, what we're interested in is whether reaction time is informative. Reaction time of a player is informative to another player. And more specifically, do people interpret reaction time as a signal of the decision maker's intention to cooperate in social dilemma games? Now, let me give you some background of the literature. So as you may know, reaction time is getting a lot of attention, and mainly from behavioral economists and psychologists. The reason is because reaction time can give us an idea of decision-making processes. Okay? So in the absence of directly observing the decision process, you could observe the reaction time as telling you perhaps whether people are using more of the intuitive decision-making or the deliberative decision-making. Okay? So for example, Rand, Green, and Nowak have a paper which has been very influential, has a lot of citations in 2012. And they observed that subjects who reached their decisions more quickly in social dilemma games actually were more cooperative. So they observed this correlation. To establish causation, they look at time constraints. So they induce short time versus long time in the lab. And they prime the subjects by making them recall situations when they made a quick decision and failed terribly, versus when they made a quick decision and was a very good decision. Okay? In that way, they prime them to either be predisposed of thinking as positively or negatively about the quick decision. So the takeaway of the whole kind of study is that the automatic intuitive responses support cooperation, and reflection undermines cooperative impulses. So when you get people to think about when your intuitive decision led you astray, people were less likely to cooperate. Okay? So there seems to be a strong correlation between the reaction time of individuals and their likelihood of cooperating. Of course, there are some problems with this approach, and the more obvious is the reverse causality. That indeed, if you are using the intuitive decision making, you will make a fast decision. But fast decision does not imply that you're using intuitive decision making. So it goes one way, but not necessarily the other way. And there is a response to the previous paper by Kravitz et al. In 2015 that really kind of shows that indeed you can have both ways. You can have cooperation very quickly, or you can have selfish behavior very quickly as well. What matters is the strength of your preferences. Okay? So what drives the decision reaction time is not whether you are cooperative or selfish, but it is how attractive the decision is to you. So, so for example, this is a reaction time. So this is an inverse U-shape function where in the x-axis you have the difference in attractiveness of two decisions. So you could think of decision A and B. And if decision B is relatively more attractive than A, you are going to quickly choose B. So you're going to be selfish. But if decision A is more attractive than B, you're also quickly going to choose A. So you could be really selfish very fast and really cooperative really fast, depending on how attractive being selfish versus being cooperative is. Yes?
I wonder if you have a decision that you really don't want to make. So you just delay. Is that what you're going? You just delay that.
Yeah. So exactly. So there is another thing, which is, what is this? In this case, basically, according to this approach, this is when there are just identifiable differences between the two options. Okay? So you like green apples, you like red apples, you like apples in general, and you're like, so what do I get? But really, it doesn't matter if you make a mistake. So it shouldn't take you that long. But it should matter how significant the mistake could be. If you're choosing between Paris and Rome, you like them both. But then, then it's when you're probably perhaps delay. But so I'm not going to talk too much about reaction time and the difference in utility. That's where we want to go. By the way, this experiment, the data I'm going to show are only data from pilot experiments, and so there's a caveat in what I can show you. Okay. So we have two hypotheses. So we do believe that reaction time demonstrates strong preferences, whereas the reaction time represents the strength of preferences, and that what really fast reaction time shows is perhaps a strong preference, and slower reaction time will show doubt. We have two hypotheses. First, that cooperative decisions do not always occur more quickly. And the other is, which we are more interested in, is because other people have looked at reaction time and cooperative versus selfish decisions. What we are more interested in is saying, if you're playing a game, what do players see as somebody who takes longer than somebody who's fast? Is the reaction time of another individual informative about their tendency to cooperate or not? Okay. So we do a laboratory experiment at the Center for Neuroscience at the lab, and we use Python, and that has been the problem because our program crashed twice. But we are doing a lot of experiments, game experiments with Python, and that seems to be a really good approach. But again, anyway, so it's a within subject study. And we compare the behavior basically of the same individuals across different decision times. They get a whole bunch of one-shot games, but here I'm going to talk only about prisoner dilemma games and the results of prisoner dilemma. In all of our experiments, we have two players, 2x2 games, two players being matched. The column player is randomly assigned to row or column. And the row player always chooses first. But the row player doesn't observe what the column player sees. Okay, so there's what's called the pseudo-observability or virtual observability. So later on, as we get more data, we are going to also study virtual observability in this setting. But right now, we are just looking at what does the reaction time how does the reaction time affect the other players' willingness to cooperate? And so timing of decisions. So in this experiment, half for row and half for column. In the first part of the experiment, players played games with a computer, and there was no feedback. And the idea of this was to calibrate the reaction time of our players. And after this, they answered a survey questions, and there were 3 types of surveys that they had. And then the computer part was followed by random player matching. So each player was randomly matched with another player, and they play a series of one-shot games. Column player always moved first. Row players waited for column's decisions. There was no feedback. And then we split, because there were 32 games they played, that's a lot. We split the games into thirds so that the players will not get too bored. So we had 3 parts, and each part had 10 to 11 randomly selected games. We randomized the order of the games in each session, and so we had stack hand game, battle of the sexes. We came up with 2 kinds of games, like prosocial behavior type games, and then prisoner's dilemma. So today I'll just talk about the prisoner's dilemma. We also had these surveys between each part of the experiment. Again, and the purpose of these surveys was to kind of get information about attitudes. This guilt and shame proneness scale will tell us a little bit about how likely the individual is to be prosocial or cooperative. And then the need for cognition test, how careful are they about paying attention to the game. So we wanted to get these also psychological variables. But at the same time, this surveys will help us kind of to break the monotony of making so many decisions, one-shot game decisions. Okay, so there's the specific prisoner's dilemma game. This is a game introduced by Krebs and used by Andreoni and Miller as well. So we have a dominant strategy. In this case, row player will choose down, because this is bigger than this, and this is than this, and column player should choose right. So the cooperative outcome will be for both to go up left, but they have very strong incentive. As you can see, the gain from deviation is pretty high. They have strong incentive to keep cooperating. So this is another one. It's also a game with a unique dominant strategy. It's a prisoner's dilemma type of game, but here the incentive to deviate is weaker, comparably speaking. So again, so depending on the game structure, you're going to have reaction time being strongly correlated with cooperation versus perhaps selfishness.
Do you have treatments where you have also the outcome? Because in this one, you have nothing else to react to but reaction time.
Right, that's right. Yeah, no, right now we're just looking at one shot. Yeah, so they don't get any feedback. Right. Right. So we're just looking at interested in how people see this reaction time. Now, I'll show you the screenshots of the screens that the subjects saw. So these are the other games that we looked at. These are kind of interesting because in this case, remember, column player is the first mover, and so in this case, column player. Consider this case, the column player really doesn't matter what row is doing. The column player is going to get 200 no matter what. But he could or she could predict that the row player is going to choose up. And a choice of right will really generate an equal outcome, versus a choice of left will render an equal outcome. So we came up with a whole bunch of games like this that will tell us a better story about what reaction time is doing. And in this case, row player, no matter what column player does, row player gets 500. And here, so we will expect that very quickly, row is going to choose very quickly up and column left. But here, column might actually take longer to choose right, right?
But these points map into their take-home pay from the experiment?
Yes, yeah. That's a good point. Yes, so basically, so there are 32 games, but there was a discussion in the ESA chat group, which was really fruitful, about whether to pay, a random sample of subjects, a random sample. You are. So, but in this case, we pay. So we pay for 6 randomly chosen games. Okay. everyone, each subject will get paid for 6 randomly chosen games. And, but so it makes sense for them to work really hard on each game. And their matching is random, so it's not repeated.
The payoff differential for like 150 points times the probability of that thing actually entering your final payoff might be quite low in terms of actual.
Shouldn't be that low because you raise the nominal. You change the exchange rate.
Yes, exactly. These are in experimental. This is an experimental currency, so you can exchange the exchange rate. So you could think of this as being cents. So it's $2, $2 here, or you could think of being like Bolivian pesos, or like. So it's a different exchange rate, right?
Okay. I'm just wondering like how much in actual take-home pay is.
Yeah. So on average, they made $27. Okay, so I think for about an hour.
One thing I like to do, I like to, so if I have 50 periods, I like to pay for 1 out of every 10 periods.
Right.
And what that does is they're still paying attention to the last 10 periods. Just one of them's going to count.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else does this.
Oh, that's an interesting take. Right. So it's not totally random. So like, for sure, one of the last 10 will count.
So you're still,
Yeah.
you're still there.
So the survey question is an example of the survey questions. Okay, so these are screenshots of what the subjects saw, and so this is when the second part started, when they were matched with a random player, and so it says you will be randomly paired with another player. Press next. In this case, they're randomly chosen to be the column or row. So say you are column. By the way, there were several practice sessions, so they got very familiar with the matrix game. A lot of people, believe it or not, have trouble with these payoff matrices, but we really were totally sure that they understood the payoffs. So the column player would choose an action left and right, and this is what the row player will see. The exact same matrix, except that they will be waiting for the other player to become available. The other player has not made a decision yet. And then we didn't specifically tell how long it took them, but they got a sense of how long. Okay, so the results, this is the comparing, this is a pair t-test comparing the matching with persons versus matching with the computers. And you can see that it takes longer for people to make a decision when they are matched with a person. So they take this more seriously. And so there was a chance also that one of the computer games was going to count towards the payment. And but it makes sense that they will spend more time thinking about another person.
So when they go against the computer, in the case where their payoffs are always the same, what does it mean for the computer to make more money?
The computer doesn't make more money, right? So it's kind of...
They're just basically they're facing a constant.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, it's just a random thing. Yeah, that's why I'm saying it's gonna.
Fast.
Yeah, I mean they're spending like almost it's like pretty high, pretty long time. I don't know. And so this is the example of mean for all prisoner's dilemma. This we don't have enough data to. No, this is statistically significant. Sorry, it's the next one. We don't have enough data. But so the idea is that this red is the computer part, and so this is the mean of all prisoner's dilemma reaction time. And this is what I find interesting, is that so it's faster even in the computer game to choose the cooperative outcome. So I mean, it shouldn't make a difference, but so again, all this thing is suggesting that the people are just choosing based on the attractiveness of the decision. They're looking at the big number and perhaps
Wait,
just.
they're choosing the dominated strategy against a computer.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of weird. Okay, but then it depends on the game. So in this case, so they take the same to choose the cooperative or non-cooperative, and in this case, they're actually the cooperative is faster. This is where match with another person, and this is match with the computer. So they do behave. They take longer, and also there's a difference in the decision time. Interestingly enough, in this case, being cooperative takes longer. Yeah. So depending on the game, you have either taking longer or shorter. Okay, so this is this gives you an idea of the probability cooperation. So this is a fractional polynomial with a confidence interval. So this is kind of telling you that, you know, the longer it takes, sorry, the axis. In the x-axis, we have the partner's response time. And in the y-axis, we have the probability of cooperation. So this is column's reaction time, and this is row's probability of cooperation. So you can see that as it takes longer for column to make a decision, then the probability of cooperating is pretty low. Okay. I did also probit regression, and these are the marginal effects. Probit regression with cluster standard errors. And interesting, we have this really nonlinear relationship. And interesting, so what happens is that, for example, the change in the probability of cooperating when we are at about 20 seconds is about 1.2%. Okay, and it goes up when people are fast, but also it goes up when actually it goes. And this is down because the negative gets smaller. It goes this way when the time is less, and this way when the time is more as well. So this is also suggesting that there is also might be a really interesting relationship between the probability of cooperating and the other player's reaction time. So, and what we believe is driving all these differences is the structure of the game. Okay, so I'm almost running out of time. So conclusions. So reaction time are interesting to behavioral economists because reaction times can tell us much about the decision processes. And again, so some researchers see cooperation as under the framework of this dual process model where system 1 is fast and intuitive and system 2 is slow and deliberative. And people want to believe that prosocial behavior is intuitive, that we are kind of designed to be prosocial. And I think that there is little evidence in that respect, and we are observing that perhaps not only do people's reaction time could be fast when they're selfish, but also they could see others' reaction time when it's fast to be a signal of selfishness as well, not cooperation. We found with this pilot data, that's the caveat, that people take longer when watched with others versus computer. We found that preliminary evidence that cooperation is sometimes correlated with faster reaction time and other times slower reaction time. And we found preliminary evidence that players do infer cooperation intention based on the other player's reaction time. But it depends how short it is. So it's not a linear relationship. It's a bit more complex. And that's about it. And so you may wonder, why do we care? I mean, these charity practitioners, what do we learn from this? So it might be possible with the technology of today to actually tailor the message that you can tell to potential donors based on how they are reacting to your call, right? So for example, suppose I always get these phone calls from my alma mater, you know, and it has the area code 717. Okay, so when I get my cell phone, I see 717, I know that it's my college asking to contribute. So suppose I let it ring once, twice, and I answer. Versus once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and I answer. Okay? The conversation should be different depending on the reaction time. So there is some value, and with technology, as we get much more sophisticated to kind of tailor the advertising and the message to the individual, we might be able to determine that reaction time is an important variable to consider so that we shape our messages. So that's one contribution, and the other is more that what it tells us about human nature. We shouldn't be so quick to believe that we are kind of automatically and intuitively cooperative. I don't think that there is enough evidence to suggest that. Good. So that's it. Thanks.